Thank you, Marnie, and a welcome to everyone. Great to see you all and to share this Sunday morning sitting time together. Rather than start with the sitting, though, I'd like to start by speaking about loving kindness and then follow it with a guided meditation. Some of you may be more or less familiar with loving kindness practice. I think it has become very well integrated into the Western Dharma scene and practice in the past 20 years, which is really quite lovely. It adds a real heartful component to our understanding of the Dharma. For a bird to fly, it needs two wings, doesn't it? And for a life of liberation, we need the wing of wisdom, but we also need the wing of compassion and loving kindness. We find in the early discourses of the Buddha a repeated encouragement to develop four qualities towards all life, towards all beings. And those include loving kindness. In Pali, the term is Mettā, as well as karuna, which is compassion, mudita, which is sympathetic joy, and upekkha, which is equanimity. When we practice kindness, when we practice joy, when we practice love, well, it might sound a little airy-fairy, but actually it is a very powerful quality that brings us into connection, into a dynamic engagement with all life, all beings. And as such, it eliminates the sense of separation or alienation or self-interest that so many defilements feed upon. We have great power to choose how we direct our own minds, and we can choose to incline our minds towards what is caring and what is kind. The opening verse of the Dhammapada says, "Hatred never ceases by hatred, but by non-hatred does hatred cease." This quality of non-hatred, like profound non-hatred, gives us a sense of the direction of loving kindness, a friendliness, a joy and a happiness that comes when we meet all life. It's a clear intention and an attitude of non-ill will that brings us much closer to a heartful, heart-centered connection with experience. And it weakens the tendencies of mind that divide us, such as anger and aversion, ill will, fault-finding, envy, jealousy, blaming, fear. So I want to consider a bit of what Mettā is and what Mettā is not. I'm using primarily the term loving kindness, but we might consider Mettā with different terms. It might be considered loving friendliness, deep friendship, love, goodwill, non-ill will, benevolence. All of these describe the qualities of loving kindness. This term Mettā is related to the term Mettā, which means friendship, deep friendship. And sometimes it's nice to just use the term Mettā so we don't get too caught up in the associations of what love might mean or what friendship might mean in a kind of secular Western context. One of my teachers used to describe loving kindness as simply a deep friendship with life. And another of my teachers used to describe it as an attitude of non-contention. And I love these descriptions to sense what it would mean to have a deep friendship with every encounter throughout the day. And what would it mean to live in this world without contention, without conflict, without struggling to make things different than they are, but to be willing to boldly meet in a spirit of friendship, whatever life, whatever being we encounter. Can we care for the well-being of others, whether or not they meet our expectations, whether or not they fulfill our desires, and trust that metta flows towards all beings, those that we like and equally those that we don't like, those that we have that have helped us, and equally to those who have hurt us. Metta can be beyond all preferences. To receive all experience with a quality and an attitude of metta, that must include receiving the frustrating and painful experiences, as well as the joyful and delightful encounters. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha said, "The world may quarrel with me, but I do not quarrel with the world." I think this embodies that attitude of non-contention. We can cultivate loving kindness as a gentle invitation to soften our hearts, to connect with life in a deeper, clearer sense of openness. Because it's not uncommon for people to sometimes describe the pain of a closed and contracted heart. For some people, it's this wish to live in connection with life, to live with a more loving expression of life, this wish to be free from the alienation and the fear that sometimes seems to separate us from our encounters and keep them from being friendly and intimate. This desire to live in greater connection and to live with greater love can motivate not just the practice of metta, but actually brings many people to the Dharma. In the depth of metta, we might even sense that our friendship with life is growing. It's growing within us, it's growing around us, and our capacity to meet experience, especially the experience of other beings, with mindfulness and connection and kindness continues to expand. And as the metta expands, the contraction around me and what I want dissolves. The stories of who did what to me and why it wasn't fair, the grasping after what I believe I deserve, and the armor that we sometimes weave around our own hearts all melt in the field of kindness. As metta develops within our own minds, it's associated with profound gladness of mind. It produces tremendous happiness. If you want to develop a loving kindness practice and are new, I recommend reading Sharon Salzberg's book, Lovingkindness. There are many other books out there which are also quite fine, but I often refer to Sharon Salzberg's work. And I love the subtitle of her book, which is called The Revolutionary Art of Happiness. Because when we are developing metta, we are taking responsibility for our own happiness. Shantideva said that the only way to make yourself happy is to practice love and compassion. Now, this certainly challenges many of the views that assumptions that people are raised with. Oh no, you have to be, you will be happy if you get more money, or if you get what you want, or if you get a house in this area, or this kind of a job, or this kind of a partner. But Shantideva says the only way to make yourself happy is to practice love and compassion. And I think there's a lot of truth in this statement. But it doesn't imply that practicing metta is easy, because deep friendship is not always easy. Friendship implies being there, present, connected, caring, open, right through the difficult times of life. We should also consider perhaps what metta is not. And if the obvious thing metta is not is what's called its far enemy, which is its opposite. The opposite of metta, metta as goodwill, the opposite is ill will. And the practice of metta, as we start cultivating metta, as we strengthen our intention to have greater metta and friendliness in life, it's going to bring to light any tendency towards ill will in this process of purifying the mind and the heart. And sometimes meditators say, it seems like the anger is stronger because of the loving kindness practice, but I guarantee the anger will not be stronger. If you can see it and know this is ill will, this is anger, this is fear, if you can see it, it is not stronger, because it's through seeing very clearly that we dissolve the power of the defilements. Mettā is considered to be a traditional antidote to all states that are classified as dosa states. Dosa is translated as hate-rooted states, or things like anger and irritation, a remorse and fear, rage and irritation, annoyance, and those aversive-oriented qualities. I would also say that metta is not strictly a feeling. Many people look to the feeling life. How do I feel to determine whether or not there's metta? But I suggest we instead look to our attitude, our intention, because metta is a mental factor. It can be cultivated intentionally. It can be developed. I don't think we should look to a pleasant feeling or a sensation in the body in order to determine whether or not metta is present, but we can look towards our motivation. Is there an intention of well-wishing and goodwill? And to me, this distinction between looking to the feelings or the intention is very important, because feelings change all the time. They change with the circumstances. Some events are pleasant and other things in life are unpleasant. But metta can be more steady, stable. It can pervade even moments that really don't feel good. Metta is not a passionate, sentimental quality. Passion involves too much attachment, and sentimentality, well, it includes only the sweetness. It's just too nice. But metta is a stronger quality that bears pain as well as pleasure. Now, the near enemy of metta, also something that metta is not, is attachment. And a near enemy is considered a near enemy because it's a quality that's easily confused with being that factor that we're cultivating. It may resemble it, it might feel similar, or it might just be commonly confused with it. An attachment might be confused for some people with metta, but it's not. Metta is not an erratic, passionate reaction. It's not limited to only the people that we like. It's not affection for particular groups or individuals that we feel fondness towards. The receptivity of metta is powerful. It's not mushy. It's a source of strength and stability that embraces all life. That life that is near and that is far, that is similar, that is different. The encounters that are pleasant or unpleasant. There's a friendliness that pervades all distinctions. Metta is a commitment that we make in our own hearts for the goodwill of all. And it doesn't demand that other beings be nice to us in exchange. It's not transactional in that sense. It's not controlling, and it's not manipulative. Quite some time ago, when I was studying Mettā, I spent some years of my practice focused on Mettā as the primary form of my practice. doing a 1 4-month retreat followed by several 1 to 2 month retreats, and then also making it my daily practice for quite some time, almost 2 years. And during that time, I went through the discourses of the Buddha, looking for the various suttas in which the Buddha taught metta, wanting to understand in particular not what he was teaching so much, like not how to do metta wasn't my concern. What I was interested in were the contexts. In what situation did he opt to teach metta? For what purpose was metta taught? And it was quite interesting to then categorize the different suttas based upon, cluster them based upon the purpose for which they appeared to be taught. Sometimes he taught metta as a form of right intention. There's the Noble Eightfold Path, and the second path factor is right thought or right intention. And that intention of goodwill, sometimes referred to as the intention of loving kindness, is one approach to developing metta. Sometimes he taught it as a gift that we give to all beings. Sometimes as a basis for concentration, and metta actually can be developed to be a suitable object for deep meditative absorptions, including the jhanas. He also taught it as a practice of happiness, as an antidote to fear, as a way of living in harmony in community, as a way of meeting verbal abuse, and as an integral component of right speech. If we're trying to assess whether or not we should say something, one of the factors that we check is, are we coming from a heart of loving kindness, from a place of friendship? He also recommended metta as a method for gladdening the mind, as a basis for insight, and as a temporary liberation of the mind from ill will. And then, of course, very commonly and yet utterly profoundly, he described metta as an immeasurable deliverance of mind. So he was not teaching metta as just like a little feel-good practice, kind of that we end our sittings with a little like drop of goodwill. It was a practice that is integrated into many aspects of the path. In fact, it's included in aspects that one would classify as the practice of sila, of virtue, as well as samadhi, concentration, and wisdom, insight, panya. So that the 3 trainings of sila, samadhi, and panya describe the whole of the Eightfold Path. And we find metta appearing in each of these components. So I think we shouldn't underestimate the potential for metta practice as a component of our liberation. And we also shouldn't estimate the power of developing a mind that is content, that is happy, that is glad and infused with friendliness. It's said in the suttas that in a mind that has metta, gladness arises. In a mind that is glad, rapture is born. Where there is rapture, tranquility arises. With tranquility comes pleasure. With pleasure comes concentration, and concentration produces happiness as well. So each step in this developmental process fuels each factor in this growth of wisdom and clarity and compassion. Metta cultivates conditions of mind that produce a great support for other meditation practices. We can take metta as our primary practice for for our daily practice. We can do retreats that are exclusively based upon metta, or we can combine metta with our mindfulness and insight, or allow it to support other aspects of meditation or wisdom. It's quite common for people to use metta as a supporting practice for prayer, for concentration and jhana, for contemplation, for investigation and mindfulness practices. I spent a number of years practicing in the forest monasteries in Thailand. And at one monastery that I frequently stayed at, we were encouraged to do any kind of meditation practice that we wanted, really. Some people were emphasizing samadhi, some were working with the breath, some were working with satipatthana, mindfulness of practices that include body, feelings, and mind. Some were working with emptiness. There were a lot of different practices occurring in that monastery. But we were all asked to practice metta before we got out of our mosquito net each morning. And I think that that's a lovely practice that we can easily undertake in our lives. Before you get out from under your blankets in the morning, practice a little loving kindness. Start your day with loving kindness. Before you put your feet on the floor, establish a sense in your mind of goodwill and benevolence towards life. It doesn't have to be an extensive practice. It could just be, 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, but it can be very powerful to establish this quality of loving kindness to begin each day. I do love the formal meditation practice of loving kindness, but I also think there are many moments in the day that we can cultivate this profound quality by bringing kindness and sensitivity to little encounters. When we go to the grocery store, we see many people, and often people are just focused on getting the items that they want and out as quickly as possible to go on to whatever the next thing is. But maybe you could make the grocery store part of your metta practice, and that anybody that you see in the grocery store becomes a being worthy of metta. Maybe you're stuck in traffic, and sometimes people just try to distract themselves or grumble or get irritated. Well, there's all these other people in the cars around you, and there may be birds in the trees outside the car window. So it's a good opportunity. There are beings there to cultivate metta. Sometimes we see people that are in a hurry, rushing here and there, not very in touch with their experience. And it's a good opportunity to offer metta, to have an attitude of kindness and friendliness. There are so many encounters that we have day in and day out with animals, with birds, with insects, with people, with children and old people, with healthy people and ill people, with people of all kinds of different places, different classes, different situations in life. And with all beings that we encounter, we can find opportunities to meet them, to greet them with loving kindness. Sometimes we might do this with a smile, a very conventional greeting, just a smile. But often we can do it just silently within ourselves, so that we practice a stream of loving kindness and benevolence with all the beings we meet in a day. This kind of a practice is an opportunity to shift habitual patterns that we might have, those habits that keep us a little bit selfish, a little bit oriented towards me and my concerns. A little example of this would be something that occurred in the monastery when I was sitting, we would go through the I had a little coconut bowl, and we would go through the line, the food line, after the monastics went through, and receive some rice and some vegetables and some curries or fruits or whatever food had been offered that day. And so then I would take my coconut bowl and I would go sit under a tree. Now, this was the forest. And in Thailand, the forest means jungle. And that means there are bugs of all kinds. And they don't have just like little ants. They have these big ants with these antler, these like antenna, and they wander around and walk here and there. And they really seem to have this sense of, a good sense of smell, I think, because they would always know wherever I was with my coconut bowl. And at lunch, after I sat down, sure enough, there would be some ants coming to join me. And I was sitting cross-legged on the dirt, on the floor, on the ground. And the ant would crawl up my foot and then up my leg and then into my lap and then into the bowl. And it would try to take a rice, and then it would go all the way down. And a few times I would just sort of watch them do this, but I have to say I did not like having the ant crawl up my leg and into my lap and into the bowl and then go back down with the rice. But it seemed that each ant only took one piece of rice. So after being sort of irritated by this for some time, and sometimes trying to move to another place, but there's no place you can move to sit in a jungle that doesn't have ants, I realized, well, like, may they be happy too. May they have what they need. And so I would take, when I saw one approaching my foot, in the cross-legged posture, they seem to just come up the foot and go up to the knee and then over the thigh. You know how they come in. They have their route. And I would just take one little rice, and before they got on my foot, offer it to them on my finger. And sure enough, they took it and scurried in the other direction, scurried back to their colony or whatever they would do with the rice. I don't know if they ate it themselves or shared it with their ant mates. And what was so interesting for me was that this very simple gesture, what made a shift from being very irritated, like I got to protect me and my bowl of food, and the ant is on me and I was irritated, to just a sense of friendliness and benevolence and kindness. And it's a simple shift that took the conflict out of the experience. It took the problem out of that relationship. And I think that those kinds of little things that we do, where for some reason we're making a problem out of something that doesn't need to be a problem. I mean, really, in a whole meal, they might have ate 6 or 8 pieces of rice. There weren't that many that would come on me. So it's like not a problem. And yet I at first was making it into a problem, and there wasn't friendliness. There was irritation. I think we can find those kinds of little things in our daily lives and see, well, is there another way of interacting with this that is coming from a place of friendship and benevolence and kindness, that really wants to help beings have what they need, and do and be kind to all life. Now, ants might be easier than some human relationships, because human relationships, of course, can be a bit more complicated. But we just need to start with this commitment of loving kindness. Let it build and let it grow from easy situations until it actually can transform conflicts and very difficult situations. Even in situations where we can't stop another, where there's a conflict and we know the other person is doing something that is harmful or hurting us, or is somehow very painful or difficult, I think we can still work with our own mental attitudes, our own relationship to that difficult person, our own relationship to conflict, and influence our own way of dealing with conflict, so that instead of reacting with habitual anger, fear, and hate, we see conflict we see challenge, like a challenge over rice in this little situation. We see it as an opportunity to just bring more love into life. When we undertake a formal meditation practice, people sometimes use a quality or an approach that is radiating, like generates loving kindness and radiates it out in all directions, much like one might have a light or a lamp that radiates out, or drops a pebble in the water and it ripples out. But we can also develop loving kindness in a way of receiving the experience. And I think there are suggestions in the suttas with both kind of perspectives. One problem that can come if somebody is always and only radiating is that radiation might make us think that somebody should receive our metta and be transformed and affected by it, so that not only are we developing friendliness towards them, there might become an expectation that they be friendly towards us. We might, in the extreme, expect somebody to like us, or to thank us, or to appreciate that we were giving them metta. But I really feel that metta should not be used to affect other people's condition and mind. It's a way of transforming our own attitude. It shouldn't be a transactional, it shouldn't interfere with others. I don't think it's meant as a tool of social manipulation or manipulation in relationship. So I think it might be clearer to have an attitude of receptivity, to learn to receive the encounter with beings with kindness, to perceive the world with metta, to receive each contact with an attitude of non-contention and benevolence. And so I tend to prefer a more welcoming of others into my heart, rather than a radiating of this force of kindness at them. But I think we can combine these approaches. We can develop metta in a variety of ways. I don't think there's a bad way here of cultivating metta, and the actual practice can develop according to your interests, because there really are many ways of cultivating a heart and a mind of pervasive goodwill. Another simple thing to do is to just notice the many creatures that you share your day with. It's hard to take a walk anywhere and not at least experience the multitude of insects, or like various kinds of bugs and birds, various, where I live, there are coyotes and deer. Maybe there's wild turkeys, or a neighbor has chickens or a rooster. Whatever life you see in the animal world, that's also an opportunity to cultivate metta. You may not see the life. I love to listen to the sound of the crickets, listen to the croaking of the frogs, those whatever sounds, whatever insect sounds are in your location. Listen to them in the daytime, listen to them at dawn and dusk, listen to them in the middle of the night, and know that these are beings that we can have kindness and benevolence towards. I'm quite convinced that the birds that live near my home know me and can actually distinguish different members of the family. We don't feed the birds, but we put out some water for them in a bird bath that we change regularly. And sometimes, they if we forgot to change it and it was starting to get low, some of the birds will land and squawk into the window. Which I find very amusing, reminding us to do our chores. And I think they do actually know us. So maybe we can Just notice them, and notice them with interest, with friendliness, and with kindness. When we start to embrace so many different kinds of beings in this world with loving kindness, one immediate experience that people describe is of just feeling more connected, less separate, not so alone, not so alienated in the world. Metta offers us a practice to overcome not only hatred towards the other, but also fear. And in fact, the very first instance that in the suttas in which the Buddha taught loving kindness seems to be a situation in which a small group of monks had gone into a forest to practice the rains retreat. And you might be familiar with the monastic custom that they select a place for their rains retreat. They go there and they're supposed to stay there for 3 months. But this particular forest was inhabited by tree spirits. And these particular tree spirits weren't so keen on having the monks in their forest. And so they decided to try and scare the monks away and make them leave. So they would make like ghost noises, boo, and make the branches creak, and blow a cold breeze on the back of their neck when they were trying to meditate, and do whatever various things that spirits do to try to scare people away. And the monks were terrified. They were just terrified. And so they went to the Buddha and said, please, please give us permission to leave this forest and begin our rains retreat in another location. But the Buddha said, no, you go back to that same forest and practice Mettā. And then he taught them the Mettā practice. So we might not be so concerned with ghosts and tree spirits now, but fear is very often an experience that still causes us a tremendous amount of pain and that people tend to contract with. What are we afraid of? Maybe we're not afraid of tree spirits. Maybe we're not afraid of wild animals that might have been in that forest, but we might be afraid of pain. We might be afraid of being hurt. We might be afraid of loss, or afraid of being wrong. We might be afraid of being embarrassed. We might be afraid of being alone. Fear stops us from acting on our good intentions. It isolates us because when we're afraid, we're less connected with others. Fear is based on a sense of separation, and it prevents us from doing the very things that we know are good and useful. We can probably all think of a time when we wanted to help somebody, but we were afraid to act. And we might, maybe there are times when the wisdom tells us we shouldn't act, that fear was combined with some wisdom that said, no, it's too dangerous to get involved in this. But many times, we're just afraid maybe doing the wrong thing, maybe saying the wrong thing, maybe having a little bit of personal discomfort. And it prevents us from really putting out our generosity, our love, our kindness, and acting on our best intentions. But Mettā softens that feeling of separation. It dissolves the experience and contraction of fear. And it eliminates those rigid separations that make me and you seem so far apart. The I and the other all dissolve in this boundless dimension of love that can pervade all beings. When Mettā is strong, it infuses our perception so that we see and hear and touch and think with loving kindness. And there's a beautiful discourse that describes a group of monks who practice in great harmony together. And when the Buddha asks them how they practice so well together, he said, they see with kindly eyes, they hear with kindly ears. Can we have this sense of having kindly eyes rather than judgmental and hypercritical eyes with everything that we see? Or kindly ears, kind hearts? Our immediate awareness in the present moment can be imbued with goodwill. We can combine this attitude of loving kindness in every experience of mindfulness. So not only are we aware of a sensation, we meet it with an attitude of kindness. Not only do we see a being or hear the sound of a cricket, we experience it with an attitude of loving kindness. Mettā is not just an antidote that is applied after the fear has arisen, after the anger, ill will, or hate has preoccupied the mind. Mettā can become the genuine way we experience all contacts with life. We can experience life with non-contention. We can develop a benevolent attitude toward all life, a deep friendship with every being, known and unknown, until finally we realize for ourselves the direct experience of the immeasurable liberation of the mind through mettā, through loving kindness. And I'm going to end the talk there and do a guided meditation. But first I should probably just say a few comments or words about the dana practice. It relates very much to the mettā practice, actually, because we're really practicing generosity and dana. Marnie described very, very well and beautifully that, we live in a world where there are needs. These kinds of events can't happen without material and financial support. As well, Dharma teachers actually can't teach the Dharma without material and financial support. This is my livelihood, as it is with many of, if not most or all of the teachers that are connected with Sangha Live. So we very much appreciate your contributions to compose our livelihood, to help us continue to pay the bills that come in, every day, every week, every month, and live in this world with sharing the teachings of kindness, wisdom, and liberation. So I will very much appreciate your contributions. And why don't we move towards a guided, I think Marnie will put some links in the chat box to make it convenient for you to offer a dana. So you may, if you've been sitting a while now, you might want to just stand and change your posture. And then settle again into a sitting meditation. And to take a moment to let your attention settle into the body, to feel the body sitting. Feel the contact with the floor and the seat. Feel the sensations of where the hands touch. So we're present in the experience we're each having in our own rooms and spaces, wherever we may be. And take a moment to think of something that you respect about yourself, simply because when we think of the good, when we think of the virtuous, loving kindness comes more easily. So think of some good quality. Maybe spending this time meditating, that's a good quality. That's a good deed, a good action. Maybe you're honest. Maybe you like to help people, whatever it might be. Think of yourself in a good light. And then allow this thought to arise, this intention to arise for your own well-being and happiness. And we can stimulate that intention by reciting a phrase. Traditionally, there are 4 phrases. One about safety. May I be safe and protected from danger and harm. Another phrase about mental well-being. May I be happy, free from mental distress. May I be healthy, free from illness and pain. And may I live with ease in this world, free from conflict and struggle. You might choose to recite these long phrases, or you might choose to shorten them. You might want to develop a different set of phrases. Change the language, change the words. You can make the intentions your own, but they should be quite general. Something that you would wish not only for your best friend, but also for an earthworm in the garden and a zebra. All beings want to be safe and have mental and physical well-being, have what they need in life. And so we keep the Mettā very general so that our wishes can pervade all beings. But as we begin the practice, we start right where we are. We offer kindness and friendliness towards ourselves. May I be happy. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be well. Allowing this kindness and benevolence to emerge from our inner resources of goodness and suffuse every cell of our body, every dimension of our minds. Just fill our being with benevolence and kindness. People may choose to spend more or less time working with the loving kindness towards self. But I think for loving kindness to actually be loving kindness, it must be extended towards, it must develop in conjunction with other beings. So bring somebody to mind who is easy to be friendly towards. Maybe somebody who makes you smile, somebody whose good qualities are very obvious, somebody who is relatively virtuous or has helped you. And to take a moment to picture that person, or perhaps a pet. And offer these wishes. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be free from pain. May you live with ease. And repeat these or your own phrases, holding the image of that being in your mind, trying to see them at a moment where their virtues or their happiness was clear. One of my teachers would always encourage us to see their happy, smiling face. And then you might sense that there are other beings around you. Maybe not in the room with you, maybe so. Maybe in other parts of the building, maybe in the neighborhood, maybe in the city. Other humans, other animals, other insects and birds. And allow this goodwill to just flow forth, to radiate out, to pervade that area, say the size of wherever you define your city, your village, your county. Expanding the field of loving kindness, sensing there is life in that region. And you can develop friendliness towards all forms of life that are living near to you. May all these beings be safe. May all these beings be happy. May all these beings be free from pain. And may all beings live with ease. Benevolence and kindness towards all beings around you. And then let the mind expand to perceive beings in a wider region. Maybe in your countries or on your continents, in the surrounding seas. Many beings known and unknown. May they be happy and well. And then allow the loving kindness to gradually suffuse the entire planet. To consider the many kinds of life, people of different cultures, some young, some old, males and females. Animals, some that have hooves, some that have paws. Animals that live in the trees, animals that live in the mountains, animals that live in the plains, animals that burrow into the ground. The life in the seas and in the waterways. In the rivers and in the depths, the deep channels of the ocean. The birds and the beings that live that fly through the air. Every kind of being, reptile, insect. Sense this planet pulsing with life, and that your heart can be open and friendly towards all forms of life. With this attitude of benevolence, we wish, may all beings be safe. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from pain. And may all beings everywhere live with ease. Allowing your sense of awareness of beings to remain open and expanded. Beings of any kind of beings anywhere, perhaps even beyond this planet, we don't know. Set no boundaries, set no limit to the loving kindness. Simply generating an attitude of goodwill towards life and allowing that to suffuse our perception of any kind of life. Well, thank you for joining me in this Mettā meditation. There are three components of it. There's the visualization or the sense of beings. It doesn't have to be visual. Sometimes there's the sound, as I said, like of the crickets or the frogs. Sometimes there's just a sense of life, and we may not know what it even looks like. But there's the component in this practice of cultivating metta that has the beings as the object. Then there's the quality of the mind meeting those beings, which is of metta, friendliness, benevolence, and kindness. And then we have that intention, that articulated phrase, that intention. Some people may experience certain feelings, where the maybe of warmth or coolness in the heart, a sense of openness physically, but we don't take the sensations as the object in this practice. We're really looking towards beings and cultivating this attitude, though physical sensations might be incorporated into our awareness that help us identify metta, that help us cultivate it and stay connected with it. So there is a little bit of a juggling as we begin the practice with phrases, images, as well as the quality of metta. But then as the quality builds, the practice simplifies. We might shorten our phrases to just a short phrase, then just a word, and then it might be nonverbal. The intention would not even need to be verbalized. We'd have a sense of the benevolence, of the friendliness, of the metta, even without articulating a phrase. So don't be surprised. Don't feel like you always have to hold to that mouthful of long sentences. No, you can develop the practice in more simpler and efficient ways. And often we do that. It happens naturally as our concentration deepens. So I'd like to open for any questions you might have about developing metta or how it might develop in your meditation practice or in your life. It can go beyond the sitting practice. Elizabeth, I see your hand. Marnie was going to call on you, but I didn't hear her. So please go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much for this really meaningful practice. I am wondering if you can speak to cultivating loving kindness in moments where we feel activated or feel the kind of irritation that you were speaking to before, kind of your thoughts on how to bring this to mind and to body in the moments where we're activated.
Well, I think it's a really great time to use metta. And the Buddha certainly talked about using metta when in any situation in which we're inclined towards anger or ill will, to actually use it like an antidote to that contraction of anger. Because if we need different resources, sometimes when we start to experience that irritation or that judgment or that fear or that contraction, we might use mindfulness and see what's happening within us. That's one approach. But we can also kind of soften our heart, soften the resistance to the experience, and just realize this, this is a friend, this is a being, especially if it's a person who's irritating us, then we can see them in a better light. We can see them as in friendship. It doesn't mean we have to agree with what they're doing. It doesn't mean we have to condone their actions, or that we have to like what they're saying. But we don't have to meet anger with anger. We don't have to meet hate with fear. We can completely shift out of the habits of all those what are called dosa states, hate-based states, whether they're angry or aggressive, whether it's turned inward or pushing or aggressive out. We can let go of all of that and just decide to meet this situation with kindness and wisdom. And that's when you might want to bring forth whatever your quickest way of getting to metta is. Some people, it will be an articulated thought. I'd really like you to be happy too. And sometimes there's an inner gesture that we've developed that we associate with wishing well. Just we may not even smile, but there might be a heart, the inner heart smiling, or something that we see, ooh, that just triggered the tendency to react in a way that I don't want to bring more hate into this world. I don't want to react that way. What are my options? So we can react with equanimity and wisdom. That's one option. We can just be mindful of our process and learn what's going on. But we have this other option of listening with an open, benevolent attitude and just consider whatever's happening there. And that's I think it's very powerful to practice that. We do have to take care of ourselves. We shouldn't become a doormat for everybody else's anger. We shouldn't just feel it. We shouldn't appear so soft that other people can just walk all over us. Metta has to have a strength. It has to be able to stay strong in its virtue. So there are times when the best thing to do is to leave or to not enter a situation. But very often when we can really trust our intentions, that trust of our good intentions actually expands our capacity to engage with very difficult people.
There are a couple things in the chat. Would you like me to read them to you?
Oh, please, go ahead.
There's a question by Jean. I hope I said that right. Jean Grant. Is metta our true nature?
I don't really use the terminology of our true nature. Some people say, well, we're all like ultimately born with friendliness and good qualities and goodwill. But I do think that there is something about the defilements that greed, hate, and delusion in its various qualities and forms. Well, I do think that they come along very young, and perhaps we come into the world with certain tendencies. So I do feel like there's a karmic process that is also going on. But I would say that when we are when the mind is let's go, and the experience, say, of the awakened mind, or the mind that is not clinging, not selfing, not caught up in the distorted perceptions that I am like this, and then reifying being of others as being like that. When the mind is free from greed, hate, and delusion, I do think that metta, or any of the other Brahma Viharas, depending on the condition, is a very natural response to the encounter with any being or any kind of life. So in that sense, I do feel like it's the expression, we could say, of the mind that is non-diluted.
Thank you. And Valeria Rueda asks, how can you reject someone or something that you identify as dangerous in a loving, kind way?
There certainly are times when we need to step away, where we need to not engage. Mettā isn't just about like opening the heart to everybody and everything and making ourselves very vulnerable. We need wisdom and we need equanimity. And there are times when we have to step away, turn away from situations that are not going to be productive and that could lead to greater harm. And so we certainly must bring in the wisdom, and how wisdom will manifest and how one would actually step away from a situation depends a great deal on that situation. You know, one relates very differently to a colleague at work than a sibling or a spouse or a child or a neighbor. You know, so we do have to bring in wisdom for sure to really consider how we want to develop relationships. But even when somebody is, there's a toxic relationship or a dangerous encounter, and what we have to protect ourselves. That's part of Mettā. We also need protection. But we do so out of kindness towards ourselves, out of wisdom, trying to reflect on the broader situation, not just the knee-jerk reaction of fear and hate.
There's a little bit of love for you, Shaila, in the chat, but I don't see any other questions yet.
Okay, I see a few hearts. Thank you. I am curious if anybody practices Mettā, if there is anything that you wanted to ask about. It looks like there's another question there. Marnie, I'll let you address it or ask it.
Okay. Heidi writes, I have had to step away from someone, my husband of 23 years, who I came to that place of knowing that more harm would happen if I stayed, especially for my children. For years, I was told that my intentions did not matter, and I want to know how to think about this as it is so ingrained.
Well, I think that's a beautiful description when it sounds like you really reflected and that it was an act of Mettā to separate because staying together would cause greater harm. So you chose the non-harming option. And so I think there are many times when we're faced with choices that, maybe it's to change a commitment, maybe it's to change a kind of a work that we're in or a relationship. And we just don't have to do these things out of hate. There can be a much softer and yet strong motivation within us to make a better choice. And it sounds like you did so very much. And I hope that that you could then, in reflecting on that, trust your intentions. Know that you made a choice that you felt really good about because it wasn't just an anger wanting to hurt the other person. No, it was a wise choice, a thoughtful choice that was made for the benefit, actually, of everybody involved. And I think when we more and more recognize and see our own Mettā, then we trust our intentions more and more. Do have about 5 minutes left if anybody had another question.
Brian writes, well, first off, Heidi said thank you. It was good to hear those words. And Brian writes, thoughts about using or not using feelings of love, kindness, friendliness, and sending out those feelings rather than recognizing the intention or attitude?
You can do both. You can do both. You can have a sense of bringing a being to bringing a being to mind, and then that produces a sense of metta, that we feel almost like an inner force that expands and suffuses the world in kindness. But we're really doing that within ourselves. We're really eliminating the tendency towards anger and hostility. We're allowing our own mind to expand and embrace beings of different cultures, different animals, different insects, and maintaining an attitude of friendliness and benevolence rather than selfishness or greed or anger or fear. So we're training our own minds to meet life with goodwill. To what extent that has an effect on others, it's hard to measure. So I don't feel like we should do it to try to make somebody, be happy with us. Interestingly, I do think our attitude has a huge effect. The thoughts that we think have an effect on other people. I have no doubt about that. Somebody who's angry walks into a room, where people are, say, sitting around, and sometimes just their presence, even if they don't say anything, is felt, and the room gets silent and people look around wondering, oh, what's going on? I think we are attuned to a lot more than just what is said. And similarly, when somebody has a lot of loving kindness, there can be a sense around them of non-fear. We're not afraid to approach them. And it's not uncommon to practice loving kindness and use various people that we might see, like in the bakery or in the coffee shop or in the grocery store. Don't know them very well, but we've been generating metta with the thought of that person. It's just sort of a neutral person that we encounter in life. And then suddenly they become more friendly towards us. And why that happens, well, I don't know. I don't think that should be our motivation for doing it. I feel like it's a powerful motivation is to recognize the root poisons of anger and hostility and all dosa states, and undertake a variety of practices, including mindfulness and investigation, and insight practices, as well as metta, to uproot all forms of ill will and hate, and just to make that deep commitment to not add more hate into life in all kinds of ways. Metta becomes an important component where we can cultivate attitudes within our own minds that shift those inner tendencies. So yes, we can radiate it as a kind of a thought. We could also have the sense that our mind actually expands to all beings and just meets everything with kindness. Or we could have that sense of receptivity, that we're just friendly with whatever we perceive. There's a wide variety of ways of cultivating metta, but I feel like it really must uproot our inner hate. And that's its main purpose. And with that understanding, that purpose, then we can develop a variety of techniques, styles and approaches to practice, so long as it accomplishes its purpose. It shouldn't force other people to be nice to us. It shouldn't say, I'm going to give you metta only if you're nice to me. Metta actually has to be available to all. It's a boundless, immeasurable quality of mind and heart. So that's a feature of metta. If it's only available for those who we like, it's not metta. It's affection, fondness. Sure, it's a kind of friendliness, but it's the conventional friendliness. I wouldn't apply the word metta to it. If it's if there's no beings in it, I also wouldn't apply the term metta to it. So if it's only, I don't have it, for me, metta is towards beings. It's not towards the teapot. It's not towards the pen. I don't really have metta towards this paper clip. I may not, I may, value the paper clip. I may not want to waste it. I may not, throw it away, but if it broke and I threw it away, I just don't feel like I could say, paperclip, may you be happy. I feel like metta is an attitude that we have towards beings. So to me, it's important that as we're developing it, we bring to mind beings, that we're not just sitting and creating a certain feeling and imagining that feeling radiating out to the computer and to the, the bell stick and to the clock and to the walls and that, but there's beings here. So it could be fun. Hopefully some of you are actually having thoughts of benevolence, maybe not towards your computer screen, but towards the beings who you're seeing on the screen. And I feel like that's an important component of metta, is that it's a heartful and wise, kind, non-hostile response to life. And the effect of that is it uproots the hostility and ill will. But it actually does more than that. It's considered the direct antidote to hostility and anger and ill will and all dosa states. But it also, since it uproots selfishness, it helps eliminate all the hindrances and establish the mind in concentration, because the mind gets very happy, calm, concentrated, tranquil, so that we're able to see things more clearly. So it therefore then supports the development of insight and can be integrated into all aspects of our practice.
This has been so beautiful. I know that we are out of time, and I do wish to honor that for everyone. There was one more question in the chat. I don't know how you feel about responding to that, or
go ahead and read it.
So Josephine says, I feel drawn to metta practice. Following on other questions, I still feel or hear a tension in opening with love and knowing that some people are fairly scary. So can you comment more on that tension?
Well, I'm quite convinced that relating to scary people, encountering scary people and having fear and hatred, it doesn't actually help us make a wise decision. I still am very confident that benevolence and non-hostility will keep us wiser and safer. That doesn't mean that it's all soft and mushy. This could primarily be a situation where instead of the metta, it's much more the brahmavihara of upekkha and equanimity, or a little friendliness greatly supported by equanimity and wisdom. So it shouldn't be, we don't notice their defilements of other beings. You can have metta towards a mountain lion and not think, oh, you're so cute, I'm going to go pet you with my friendliness. No, you have metta from a distance. You're metta from a distance. You don't wish them harm, but nevertheless, you keep your distance. And there's a lot of people, too, that might be a wise response. Well, I think we can wind up with this. I'll just say my own goodbyes and thank you, and then pass it to Marnie. Thank you, everybody. It was great to practice a little loving kindness with you today, and I wish you all much happiness and well-being.
Thank you so much.